Ransomware attack impacts almost all businesses of all sectors. There are some statistics which says in the year 2019, nearly 56% of organizations across multiple industries reported a ransomware attack. So this is what I'm going to cover in this session for backup anomaly detection to detect ransomware or malware attack. So with this, let's get started. My name is Swapnil Dombale. I'm working as Senior Principal Engineer in Veritas Technologies, Pune. And let's get started. So this is the agenda for this session. We will go through the introduction of anomaly detection. Then we will see anomaly in the backup data, a typical detection flow, and a sample feature set that we can use for machine learning models. Then we will see different ways to detect anomalies. Here I will cover few, but yeah, there could be other ways also. So let's start with the introduction. Anomaly detection is identification of any unusual pattern or any unusual data. So in case we have a past known pattern that we recognize, and if you get a new pattern which is altogether different than the old one, then it could be a malicious pattern or anomalous pattern. Also, suppose if you have some data available which is in the range say 100 to 200, or let's take example that a backup system is taking backup of a folder, and let's take example that this particular backup system is taking backup of that folder, and there are say 100 to 200 files which are getting backed up daily. So in this case, if we have a new backup happen and there are say 500 files which are now getting backed up, so the 500 number is which is very high than what compared to the earlier observations like 100 to 200. So in this case we can say that since the 500 number is very high, then there is definitely some kind of anomalous activities happening on that particular system. Typically, these anomalous data or observations will translate to some kind of internal problem, such of any kind of malware or ransomware attack. In case of say in other industries like banking sector, so in that case, banking transaction, such kind of anomalous activity can actually correlate to the any kind of bank fraud kind of transaction. Or in case of medical field, such kind of anomalies basically correlate to any kind of internal medical problem. So let's take some examples here. Like here I have shown a graph, and in this particular graph, you can see that x-axis is basically a timeline, and the y-axis shows some kind of data here. Now, just looking at this graph, we can figure out that this particular data lies between 80 to 100 values. So the most of the observations lie between 80 and 100, and there is one observation marked as a red, which is very high value than the rest of the observations. So we can doing just observations here, like we can say that this is not a usual data, this is something not expected, and just comparing with the rest of the data, we can say that it is anomalous data. So this is the way we can figure out, okay, this is the anomaly in the given data. Let's take another example. Now here for two features like x1 and x2, I have plotted their values in two-dimensional plane. Now here we can see that there are some observations with the red dot. Now these observations are very close to each other, which are marked with a red color. So we can say that these all actually are close to each other, and those are actually forming a cluster. The same thing is for these particular black dots and the blue dots. So we can figure out some observations from this particular graph, saying that is for x1 and x2 we can have either value residing in this particular red dot cluster, or in the black dot cluster, or in the blue dot cluster. So this is the past observation. We know that data can either resides in any of these clusters. So when we get a new observation, and if that particular new observation falls in this particular cluster, or this new observation is basically nearby to these red dots, then we can simply say that it is a valid observation. However, let's take example that this particular point here, which is not actually a part of any of this cluster. It is neither fitting in this black dot cluster or this particular cluster, and also there are no other observations nearby to this particular observation. So by looking at this graph, we can say that this is something new that we are figured out, right? There must have something gone wrong that actually produce this kind of observation, and this is what we can call it as an anomaly, and this is what we are trying to find out, the anomaly in the backup detection flow. So with this introduction of anomaly detection, let's see how we can try to find out the anomaly in the backup data. So any backup and restore application basically takes backups in a certain regular intervals. So they have the schedules created, and as per the schedule, the backups are being happening. So this is actually helpful to get past or historical trend. So let's take example that if backup system is taking backup of a source machine, and it is taking say a folder backup, and there the backup size is around 1 GB to 2 GB. Now that particular range, like 1 GB to 2 GB, is your past trend. We know that in the past how the backup has behaved, like it has 1 GB to 2 GB of a backup size. Like we can say that 100 to 200 number of files that are getting generated. So this is very helpful to form a trend, and in case of we get a new observation, it will help to correlate with the past trend or the past data. So we can actually gather some kind of metadata from backups that are happenings. Like we can capture number of backed up files, the backup size itself, then the deduplication rate, and the time taken by the backups. Definitely there could be many other attributes that we can use, and that largely depends on the nature of system, or the nature of the data that we have, or the nature of activities, behavior that is there on the source system. But for this particular session, I will stick with these four attributes, and we will try to correlate these attributes with system where the ransomware attack actually happened. So let's take a look at the system where ransomware attack is happened. So on the infected system, we can see that file content can get encrypted. Then there can be like multiple files got deleted, or a bunch of files got renamed, or altogether new extension, all the new files with new extensions get created. So all sort of scenarios are possible. Again, I mean, there could be many other symptoms that we can figure out. So for sake of simplicity for this session, I'm taking example of these four symptoms, so that we can correlate it with the backup attributes that we are going to use for devising the machine learning model. Now let's try to correlate the attack happen on the system to the backup flow. So in case we have a attack on the source system, and we are taking a backup from that infected system. So in case of file contents getting encrypted, right? So the data in the file actually got encrypted. So in this case, what impact would or what outcome that we can see in the backup metadata? So definitely the dedupe rate will go down drastically, because it is the altogether new data that the uh, it's altogether the new data that we have seen, and the deduplication will definitely go down in this particular case. And again, I mean, the backup size in the incremental backup will increase. Then we have the for the file deletion case, right? I mean, in this case, the number of files which are getting backed up will drastically go down, because lots of files would have got deleted, and the backup time also will change, because backup data itself has got deleted. So it might probably take backup very fast. In case of file rename, so we have altogether new files, right? So number of files will increase in this particular case, and backup size in the incremental backups will also increase. In case of file extension changes, or the new files with new extensions got added, though then in that case also the backup size will increase, number of files will increase, dedupe rate will also go down because of the new contents here. So this is how we can correlate, like the impactor system, and the impact that happens on that particular system, that actually we can correlate, and we can try to find out any kind of attribute that is actually behaving abnormally. So with that correlation, let's try to see a typical anomaly detection flow in the backup environment. So we have a source system on which we are taking backups. Now, the first and very important thing is that we need to recognize, or we need to learn the behavior on each particular system, like how the data gets added, deleted in each particular system, and that actually gets reflected in the backup. Say, for example, we are taking backup of a system, and in that particular backup, the backup size is actually in the range, say 1 GB to 2 GB. Now, this is your historical data, right? I mean, this data is very useful in order to compare it with your future backups, and that data is very important. So before starting the anomaly detection mode itself, we need that particular historical trend. So once the solution is deployed, we can actually go ahead and we can capture that particular historical trend from each individual source system. Now, once that is done, now but before that, suppose there is no such historical data is available, so I'll talk about that later on. So once the historical data available, then it's a live backup, right? I mean, in the backup, we basically, once the backup is completed, we'll capture the metadata. Now, what is the metadata? Metadata is basically those four attributes we talked earlier, like we can capture the backup size, number of files, the time taken by the backup. So all these attributes we can capture, and that attributes are actually going to be the input to the anomaly detection algorithm. So this anomaly detection algorithm basically going to correlate the historical data with the new metadata, just finish the backup and the metadata we have captured, right? So it will decide whether this particular backup completed has some kind of abnormal data or not. Then it will, once it detects anomaly, then there could be a reporting mechanism where user can see the anomaly that got detected. Now let's take example that a system where user has done some kind of activities, like user has cleaned up some kind of number of files, say 1,000 files got deleted by user, and user is aware of that. I mean, user knows that, okay, I have done some kind of activity on that particular system, and but the anomaly detection, since it's just a mathematical model, right, it's going to detect it as an anomaly. So we can even provide a system where user can basically identify such kind of events or such kind of undetected anomalies, and even user can say that okay, this is not the actual anomaly because we are aware of this incident. We don't need to treat it as a anomaly. So we can provide some kind of provision for user, so that user can go ahead and mark it as a valid observation, and we can make it as a part of your historical data itself. So then going forward, it is going to contribute in further anomaly detection calculations. So this is how we can devise a solution for anomaly detection. The anomaly detection algorithm itself, there are multiple ways that we are going to talk in future slides, like uh, how we can use those algorithms. Other thing, as I mentioned earlier, that since in this particular example, I have shown that we can capture the training data beforehand, before anomaly detection gets started. But let's take example that we don't have that particular data, so we can have a solution such a way that we capture data and we'll wait till that point that basically we have the enough observations to do anomaly detection. Now, this typically needs proper analysis of your system, the behavior or the analysis of data. And this is how we can devise a proper machine learning algorithm, and we'll come to know that how many observations are basically enough in order to start the detection. So in that case, we can capture data and we'll keep capturing data until we get enough data for doing a detection. Let's took a look at a sample feature set we can use devising the machine learning algorithm. So as I mentioned earlier, we have uh, in this particular example, I'm taking like backup size is one of the attribute which we can use to see whether there is any kind of abnormal behavior or abnormal data within that particular backup size data. Then next one could be the number of files which are getting backed up, then deduplication rate and the backup time. But all these attributes will not come as it is. I mean, it has to be tagged with some sort of other data, and this is what I'm referring is like we should have those data per your source system, because it is very necessary, because the learning for each source system is going to be different than other system. Like there could be different activities going on in each system, like the nature of file getting added, file getting deleted is different on different system. So we need to tag, or we need to group together all these observations for each source system. And not only source system, we should have the policy name, because we can have a different trend for each policy name. We can have the policy type. Now policy type basically for which workload we are taking backup, like whether it's a VMware or Oracle. Now it's very important to do the training for each different policy type, because there could be a different behavior for VMware types of backups, right? And same thing for the Oracle. So it has to be, the learning has to be separate for these different policy types. And yeah, again for the schedule types also, I mean the full backups, right? So full backups can behave differently, and the incremental can also behave differently, because the data itself is a different, right? I mean the backup metadata in the backup full backup and the incremental backup is a different. So we need to treat all these attributes, and we need to capture data for all these scenarios. So the learning is going to be per your source system, per policy name, per policy type, and the per schedule type, to do the effective detection. Now, till now we have seen like which are the attributes that we can capture from backup metadata, and how the flow that we have seen, right? We have a historical data, and we can capture the data from the backup completed to do a detection. Now let's go ahead and see a few algorithms that will actually help to devise the anomaly detection solution. So here I have covered only three algorithms, but there can be, I mean, there are multiple ways we can do a detection. So I am just taking some examples here, and basically those examples are basically which algorithm to use is largely depends on your nature of data. So we need to closely observe the data, and based on the data, we need to figure out which is the best algorithm for your solution. Now let's start with this anomaly detection using normal distribution method. So in the normal distribution method, for each feature, we do standardize the training data, right? Which also includes the observation, the new observation. And once we do a standardize, it basically forms this particular Bell curve, right? So this is a typical normalized curve that we know that in the center of this curve we have this mean, and once we go away from this mean, the probability of having the data inside a particular region gets a decrease. So let's take this example, like from a mean to one standard deviation, we know that there is like 34.1% of data resides, and since it's symmetrical, we can say that okay, again for this left side also we have the same data. And as we go away from the mean, we can say that the percentage goes decreasing, right? And that's the behavior we can use identifying the anomaly in this case. So once we basically standardize the data, and we calculate the z-score basically. So, and if the z-score, let's take example that if it is more than 3 standard deviation. So 3 in the sense like it again depends on the nature of data. We need to figure out which what would be the typical boundary where we can we need to figure out the boundary after which we can treat it as an anomaly. So in this case, in this particular graph, we can say that okay, that if the data falls at the tail of this graph, so then if it is falling in this particular region, we can say that it is anomaly because it is far away from the mean of the particular data. And this particular method works for each feature. So for each feature we need to do all this calculation and try to find out the anomaly for each feature. Like for example, we need to work on backup size first, like okay, backup size, do all this calculation and try to find out the if the new backup is completed and its backup size is it anomalous or not. And we need to repeat all this for all the remaining features. Now let's see how we can use a forecasting methods to detect anomaly. So here I have taken example of Facebook Prophet algorithm. So in this case, for each feature, we do forecasting of a future value, and then we simply compare your current completed backups value with the forecasted value. So see, let's take example of this graph. So here in this particular graph, we have taken the past data and we have plotted here, and this the training happened for this particular past data, and with the past data there is a forecasting happened. So it actually predicted the future value of this using the historical data. So the Facebook Prophet, all it does is like it basically takes the input of the historical data per feature, and it calculates the upper bound and a lower bound as a forecast. So it actually predicts what value would be there for tomorrow. So let's take example that we are using Facebook Prophet and we are training it for a backup size. So for a given system, all these data that for a backup size we put as an input in that algorithm, and it actually predicts what will happen, what would be the tomorrow's value for tomorrow's backup size value, right? And once we have the new observation that we get from completed backup, we simply compare it, right? I mean, once it and the Facebook Prophet basically returns like upper and lower bound, right? So once the upper and lower bound is available with us, then we just simply compare whether the new observation falls in that range or not. Facebook Prophet also provides a seasonality factor, like we basically can introduce a seasonality. Now, seasonality in terms like if any company is taking lots of backups at the end of every quarter, or there could be some kind of activities happening at every weekend, or there are some holidays and some kind of activities are happening on the holidays. So all these things needs to be carefully observe, and we need to see whether that makes sense for your solution, like the nature of data, whether the seasonality factor is required or not. Then we can analyze that factor and we can include all the seasonality factor there, and based on the seasonality, holidays, all these factors, it is actually going to forecast for the future. So this is how we can use this Facebook Prophet model. Like for each feature, we get the training data, we feed that particular data into Facebook Prophet model, and that actually returns a y hat lower and y hat upper. So this is nothing but your upper bound and lower bound as a forecasted value. And we basically check our new observation whether that fits in that y hat lower and y hat upper. If it is fitting in that range, then we simply say that okay, this is fine, it's a valid observation. Otherwise, if it is not fitting in that range, then it is the anomaly, right? So we have to report that anomaly. Additionally, we can apply some sort of mechanism where we can increase the margin of y hat lower and y hat upper. Suppose the solution is there and it is actually having lots of noise in the anomaly. So there are lots of anomalies are getting generated. So we can increase the this particular range, like y hat lower and y hat upper, by introducing some kind of factor like just increase by 10%. So it will increase that margin, and many of the observations will try to fit in that particular range, and thus it will reduce the noise in the system. So now let's take one more example of another algorithm. Now here let's take example that how clustering based algorithm is useful in a detection of anomalies. So here I'm taking example of DBScan algorithm, which is density based algorithm. Now this algorithm forms a cluster of observations which are near to each other. And how it forms the cluster, like it basically decides the observations in the cluster or not based on a parameter. So this parameter is basically the epsilon. So epsilon is nothing but the diameter of the cluster, and other factor is like how many minimum points or the minimum observations we need to form a cluster. So these are the two input parameters to this particular algorithm. So this DBScan algorithm basically forms different clusters, and at the end it checks whether the new observation is actually falls in any of the cluster or not. And if it is not falling in the cluster, then definitely it's a new data, or the new readings that we are getting and which we haven't seen in the past. So definitely it's going, we can treat it as a anomaly. And this algorithm works in the multivariant detection. We can use for a single variable, but it actually works in the multivariant mode where all the features we can use for doing a detection. Now let's see how DBScan model works, and what could be the typical workflow in this particular algorithm. So we have a training data set and a new observation that we need to predict. So we can just append that new observation at the end of your training data, and we do standardize the data so that we can bring all variables in a, same scale. So the same scale would be a standard deviation scale in this example. Then create a dbscan model with the data above. Then once the model is created, it basically going to return array of assignments. Now array of assignments is basically for each observation the cluster number in this case. So let's take example. I have a graph plotted here for three variables like a size, a backup size, number of files, and the time taken by the backup. So we can see that here is one cluster of these observations. So we have these observations in this particular cluster, and there is another cluster which is like having all these black dots inside that, right? So we have these two clusters here, and now once the dbscan algorithm is uh, uh, model is created, it basically returns the array of assignments. So array of assignments basically for each observation in this particular cluster. Let's assume that is a cluster number is 1. So all these observations will have a cluster number as a 1. So this is what we get as output. Similarly, for this cluster number 2, all the observations in that particular cluster will have value 2. Now let's see, this particular observation is not part of any of these clusters, right? It is way away from these rest of the observations. So definitely by looking at this particular graph, we know that this is very high spike data, or this is very huge deviation in this particular data, and this is anomalous data, right? And it is also not fitting in any of the cluster. So the dbscan algorithm will return a -1 for this. So -1 here is the indication of it is not actually falling in any of the cluster, and then it is the indication for us, like if we have a -1 value for the new observation, then we simply treat it as a anomaly. Now, how do we decide the diameter of the algorithm, right? I mean, there can be multiple ways, like just doing your data analysis. We can have a hard-coded value of epsilon, and it will be some kind of configurable value. There can be other way where we actually decide epsilon value based on your past historical data. So in that case, we basically run dbscan multiple times, right? I mean, we assume that your past data is the correct data. I mean, it is free of any attack, and we use that particular data to train the model and basically capture the right epsilon value, which will actually capture all the observations in all the clusters, so that that particular epsilon value will be used in the further detection. And we can refresh that particular epsilon value in every after say 1 week or 1 month, whatever, depending on the solution that you are building and the nature of data that you have. Other parameter is like the minimum observations that we need to figure out, like how many minimum observations that required to form a cluster. And this could be a global constant across for all detection. And basically that again, I mean, we need to figure out while having a solution for the anomaly detection, we need to do the analysis of your data, and we need to figure out which is the right minimum observations required. Like it could be 3, it could be 5, anything, right? So that needs to be figured out by simply analyzing the data. And this is how the dbscan algorithm works. And as I mentioned, it works for in the multivariate model. So all features are input in this model. So this ends the three different algorithms how we can use detection. So uh, let's have the conclusion at the end. So in this particular session, we have seen that anomaly detection can serve as a frontline solution to detect some kind of attacks. So basically, the attack happened on a system, and when the backup is being done, right, and just after the backup is completed, we'll come to know that some kind of malicious activity is happening on that particular system. And it's going to be lightweight because we are working with smaller set of variables or the feature set, like backup size, time taken, all these things, and it's going to detect quickly if there is any kind of abnormal data in that particular backup metadata. It's going to be lightweight because since if you try to do a full security scan, it's definitely going to take time, right? So we can say that is a frontline solution which will do a detection very quickly, and it can give some kind of hint or indication if some kind of malicious activities are happening on that particular system or not. And other thing is that it's not only useful to find out such kind of attacks, right? I mean, if on a system any user has done some kind of deliberate act, and with that he just deleted some kind of number of files, right? I mean, that kind of actions can be detected, and backup admin typically will come to know that, okay, something is happening on that particular system, and some user has done some kind of activity on that machine and simply deleted some files, right? So all these kind of things are actually captured as a part of this solution. Now, one more thing I would like to discuss at the end of this session is that not all kind of attacks we can detect through this anomaly detection. Simply because, let's take example that suppose there is one attack happen and none of these attributes that we have captured are actually changed, right? I mean, it might change, but it's just a marginally change. It's not a huge spike that we can say. So we have the anomaly detection solution, and it detects if there is a huge spike, right? So none of these attributes are actually changing, but still there is some kind of attack there, right? So this kind of thing is not going to be detected with this particular solution. So this solution needs to be used in along with some other kind of detection mechanisms, like we do a security scan using antivirus software. So along with these, this solution needs to be used. And this is the end of this session. Thank you very much.